Welcome to Triple T and Me. I'm so excited. Today I have my Uncle Bill and my Aunt Sandy as my special guests today. Thanks for watching. How are you doing, Uncle Bill and Aunt Sandy?
Doing well, thanks.
Very good.
Great. First, can you tell a little bit how God brought you two together and how God led you to getting married and so on?
Well, I was called to the ministry through my pastor and his wife, that God had sent us just at an ideal time for me. They had been missionaries in Cuba, one of the last ones before they were all kicked out. And so she was very instrumental because she asked me what my plans were. Well, none of us had ever been to college. I mean, my brother Philip, he went to business school. She challenged me, and the fact they took me to visit a couple of colleges, one being Asbury. And so late in the year, I wrote a letter because she had already told me that they'd already filled up. So I thought, well, I'll take a chance. And so 3 days later, I got a letter welcoming me to the college. So that's how that happened. But we met in winter of '68. We were doing a radio program there in Paoli, Indiana, and my mom had put that together she was working with young people that came out of broken homes, and they put a little choir together, and we taped that every week, a half-hour program. And me and another fella did the preaching. Well, when I came in to do my time, this gal on my right was sitting on the piano bench to play the piano. So we met on a radio station. Now, later on, I tried to get her connected with the DJ on the other side of the glass, old Tom, but Tom ended up being the best man. So actually, at a Sunday afternoon hymn sing at Sandy's home church, I was there, and I had gone to plan to sing, and she played the piano. So after the service, I was really taken by her. I mean, she was only 17 years old. I mean, I could raise her like a wonder. And I said, I got a book out in the car I'd like for you to read. If you read it and what you think about it, I'll get back with you. And the title of the book was How to
Be a Minister's Wife and Love It. Obviously, I read the book, and
she did and I did.
And didn't know what I was doing, apparently.
So our courting time was very, very short. Because she had graduated from high school. I was in my second year of seminary. And so I was making up time where I ministered in Alabama that summer, making up time in summer school. So she took off with her cousin to Missouri to stay with her aunt and uncle out there close to Fort Leonard Wood. And I did 2 different months of summer school. Well, between June and July break, her parents contacted me and said, "You want to go to Missouri?"
Good old mom and dad.
So in August in '68, we got engaged. We had taken the church down at Highfield Chapel, and the deacon said we had to be married before we could preach there. So we stepped it up a little bit, and September 27, 1968 was the beginning of a long but wonderful journey, and now 52 years later.
Awesome. Well, congratulations on
Thank you.
52 years. That is incredible. You both were raised in wonderful Christian homes, right? And how was it growing up with just always understanding that God loved you and that He had big plans for you?
Well, that's wonderful. We were spared a lot. Didn't get in trouble because kids were accountable in those days to parents and the church.
And back there, church was the big deal. I mean, everybody went to church. There's nothing else around, you might say, when, the 40s and the 50s.
You never missed a revival night. You never missed VBS. I did miss Easter Sunday one time when I had chicken pox, but that was the only thing allowed, and we didn't really question it. I did one time when I was in early junior high. There was a new Walt Disney film at the drive-in that I really wanted to see. It was Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. And I asked if I could just one time miss Sunday night church. Well, needless to say, I didn't go to the movie.
But he's read the book.
But you just, you just didn't question it. If the doors were open, you were there. But no matter what, you still have to make your own personal decision too.
God has no grandkids.
That's great. So I love that. That's so true. And so when would you say that you went from, and this is for both of you, and it may be kind of the same time in your relationship or whatever, but when would you say that your faith did become your own instead of just being a part of, what your family does, but your own relationship with Jesus? I
was 9.
When you went to the altar?
Yeah, when I accepted Jesus as my Savior.
Mm-hmm. And I was 14, and it was in a revival meeting, and that was the beginning. I mean, I've been close in my relationship. Mom had a lot of great faith, and my family was, they didn't drink, didn't smoke, and the rest of the family did smoke, and he never did. And so I just had that positive influence in our lives. But so that was the beginning. And then, as I shared earlier, I had no plans of going any further in high school. My goal was to get out. I had no other goals. I didn't prepare. I didn't have any pre-college, no foreign languages, or none of that. And so when I went to Asbury and told them I was going into the ministry section, they said, okay, you'll minor in Greek. I said, what? I'll tell you one thing, I learned a lot of English in our Greek class. And I never was a good student. I mean, I was a C student in elementary school. And I got homesick. I was homesick from day one. And God provided for that. There was a fellow that was pastor. He was a senior pastoring in Illinois and went right through Orange County. And so when Mom and Dad left me off at Tuesday, when they left for my orientation, I said, I'll see you at Thanksgiving. I saw them on Saturday. And I made that trip every weekend, basically.
And interestingly enough, when we were in Papua New Guinea, the first time for 4 long years with no phone conversations and no visits home, he never got homesick one day.
My mother prayed over us before we left and said, Father, you know how homesick he gets. Don't let him forget about home, but don't let him be homesick. And God answered that prayer.
There were lots of times on Sunday afternoon we'd say, wouldn't it be nice to drop by the folks just for a couple hours? But it never made us feel homesick.
Holidays, of course, was a draw, but we celebrated the holidays we had a big mission family in the beginning. There was about 25 or 30 of us on the field, and we did go for 4 years at a time. And, that's halfway around the world in Papua New Guinea. You can go either way. In fact, we went by the Pacific and come back by the Atlantic, or vice versa. And so we got 3 world trips out of the deal. The terms. That girl that wouldn't date me because she wanted to see the world never got out of Orange County, probably aggressive, but nevertheless.
So when was it and how was it that you discerned God was calling you to go to Papua New Guinea?
Well, I started out in one denomination, and I couldn't even get ordained with them. And I went to another denomination, and they took away my local license that I did have. So I went to a third denomination that actually believed in the Bible. And so it was through the denomination, because they sent missionaries around to the churches once a month. And that's when we were exposed to it. And so in January of '69, we had a missionary, Doug Carter, came. He was from the Indian fields out in Arizona, and presented it.
70, wasn't it?
70, okay, yeah. And so that was the beginning. He come and had lunch with us and talked about, we thought we was going to Arizona, of course. And then we met with the mission superintendent. He just got back from the West Indies, and all he talked was West Indies. So we started studying that, figured we was going to the West Indies. And so when we met with the mission board, there was only 10 minutes up the road from where we were pastoring, but they didn't call us. No, they sent a letter. and told us, "You've been appointed to Papua New Guinea." And I looked at her and said, "Where is that?"
But it was funny. He had told my dad that he was going to take me to Papua New Guinea someday. We didn't even know there was hardly such a place or where it was.
So when you called him?
Yeah, they didn't believe it. They didn't believe me. They thought I was kidding. But, we didn't feel a particular draw to any particular place, which was, I guess, kind of unusual. But we just said, wherever you need us, send us.
And I was a bivocational pastor, so I was teaching 6th grade at the time, and they were in need of an English teacher to put in their school there with the local people. And so they sent me with that being my call. Well, Papua New Guinea is the land of Babel, of languages. And Papua New Guinea is only half of the island. It's on the eastern side. And when we went, there was a North Papua and a South New Guinea. But when they got their independence in 1975, that was joined together. But Irian Jaya was controlled by Indonesia on the other side. So we was just working on that one half of the island.
He taught school for the first year, and then
6th grade.
And then he got involved in actually ministering and preaching and to the village men, and I worked with the village women and the children. We were privileged in those days to do a weekly Bible class in the local schools.
Well,
so that was one of the ministries I had. I rode my motorcycle over to the school and I had an hour of Bible class with the students. Don't we wish we had that now?
But what really happened, missionaries had been doing all the teaching in the school that we had opened there in the area. And we was able to indigenize. And from the coast, we got nationals that came in and took over the school and the principal. I was sent to be the principal and did 5th and 6th grade as far as elementary school went. And only about 20% was able to go on to a high school in a different place.
How did you overcome the challenges with it being the land of Babel, as you said, and so many dialects? Like, how did you overcome the communication barriers to be able to, build relationships and share the gospel?
There was a trade language. It had a little German, a little Swiss, a little almost Pig Latinish type English, a combination of many languages put together with a limited vocabulary. And the younger people, the young generation of elementary school kids could understand that. So we learned that first, which really didn't take very long once you were immersed into the culture. But we learned that first, and that's how we taught in the elementary schools and with children, doing VBS or Bible classes because they could understand it. Then we had to use some of them as interpreters to work with us to teach their parents.
In fact, my second semester, I was asked to teach a foreign language in the school. And I wasn't learning Pidgin because everything I was doing was in English. And so I was able to really learn the grammar and all the things that I could teach them with. So that was a big step for me at that time. But so we ended up with 2 different missionaries working on the language. Our group of people spoke what is called Angalanin. It's a very sophisticated language. It has 10 different verb tenses. And
it's a tonal language.
Yeah, they can whistle it. And
Wow.
they know that. They yodel from mountain to mountain, and they can whistle right through the walls of your house, which was made out of common cane.
The yodeling is their telegraph. They can yell from mountain to mountain and be understood.
And like we have, we send a telegram, we say stop, well, they would yodel, oh, oh, and that was end of the sentence or end of the paragraph. So it was a very interesting place for sure. But finally, the language was found enough to be able to print the New Testament in their language. And we had about 10,000 in our people group, but there are 500, at least when we were there, 500 distinct different languages and 2,000 different dialects, which means as you traveled on the road, the language would change within 20 miles. It would go into another language. And a good interpreter with the government, he could start at the north end of the island, come right down and make all the changes that he would do. So we did get the Bible in print after we actually left the field in the late 82.
That's awesome. So you served there 11 years, is that right?
Well, with the home time and everything, about 12 and a half. We came home in the middle of, or the early part of our third term for medical leave. And so, you know, we started with that and had intentions of going back, but that just never happened. And God sort of took the call away from us at that time, though we continued to represent it here in the States for fundraising and history and all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm. So in your 12 and a half years there, what's some of the biggest highlights that you'll always remember about your ministry there?
Well, the one big one, of course, was the language. Our translator, Ruth Tipton, was writing it down and could become pretty fluent in it. And our people would walk into all of our stations. We had 5 different outstations, and they'd walk in every week to hear the Bible study. The pastors come in to learn the lessons. They didn't know how to read or write, but they all got pigeon Bibles, and we would track out and sort of screen them or see what they do on Sunday. And a lot of our pastors would be preaching and have their Bible upside down. And so, you know, what we took 45 minutes to teach them, they may put out there in 1 minute or 2.
But now we have a Bible college in one of the other states. And so students are being able to come in and live there. And just recently, money was raised to build some family housing. So they've been able to bring their wives and children.
Because they just come to school for the whole term. And of course, they had obligations at home or take care of them. So we've made some real advances in the last 2 years. And God really raised the money through us. It was amazing. It was miraculous. In fact, we had 3 teams go over last year to do work and was supposed to go now. And of course, this situation has helped that up. So it's exciting to see the field taking off again because it dwindled down to about 4 missionaries when it was all said and done. But our goal when we went to the field was not to retire there. We was to work ourselves out of a job.
And now we have church leaders, national church leaders, and the pastors are learning and progressing. And the people are really dedicated, and they're watched. They really watch the lives of each other and hold them accountable. I don't know how many of us could stand up to the scrutiny that they put their own through of checking out their witness and making sure that they aren't granted membership if there's anything in their life that shouldn't be there.
We worked a lot through the medical need that was there on the field. We had nurses pretty well on every station, and the women would come in once a week for prenatal and all the weighing of the babies. And, you know, birth was a big thing. They're nationally or traditionally, they would go out by themselves, grab a tree, and birth the baby. It was not unusual for a woman to come in that had 12 children, but no living children. So they would not name a baby until the 1-year birthday because there's a good chance they were going to lose the baby.
We also did well child clinics approved by the government, and they were really organized with records. And one of my privileges was to go out on those clinics from time to time where we examined the babies, gave them their immunizations, treated their illnesses, checked in on the pregnant women, and tried to also teach them health facts. It's awfully difficult to teach a third world country about germs because if they can't see it, it's not there. And so to teach them cleanliness in a land where they might have to walk a mile or 2 to get any water is difficult. And it's difficult for them to live up to. But that was one of the things that I enjoyed greatly, was going out with the nurses and learning about the childhood illnesses and giving the shots and, you know, working with them.
And through this opportunity, as about every place churches have been planted, the women welcomed it more so than the men. And so we started teaching these women to become leaders. And we used stick figure books that we could teach them the lessons, and they could remember by seeing each page of the stick figures. And that went on for a long time and became a great influence in the communities. I went out trekking one day to visit, as we usually do at a time, to visit the chief of that particular tribe. And through his son, who was working in the medical field with us, he translated for us. And he said he had
96 children.
96 children with, I forget how many wives. But when I was there, and he was an elderly man, of course, he asked me, he said, 4 of my wives, what he was trying to say is, have become Christians, and there's been a real difference in their life. Tell me how I can do that. And we had the privilege, of course, back then we took Super 8 movies, of seeing him baptized later on.
Wow. That's awesome. Well, I really appreciate your courage because not just anybody would move, that far away. But you knew that's what God was saying, and you did it. And I know it helped that your parents supported it. Especially, I love that story about grandmama praying, for you not to be homesick, and that prayer was answered.
Yes.
Not to mention, it wasn't like you didn't have your own family. You had your kids too. So how old were Sharon and Chad while they were growing up there?
Sharon was 9 months old when we took her the first time, and she was 12 when we came home on medical leave. Then on the first furlough, we had an extended furlough because I was expecting Chad. And he was 17 months when we took him the second time. And he was 8 when we came home to stay.
But we found out later, the ones who made the sacrifice was not us. It was our parents taking their grandchildren away, because Sherry was the first granddaughter in the whole family situation. And now that we're there, I was 38 when we went to Papua New Guinea, and now we've been home 38 years. You add that up, I become 76 all of a sudden.
We have a funny but kind of touching story about grandmama. When we came home on the first furlough, Sherry was 4.5. And so grandmama was only able to just look at us and cry. She was just so happy for us to be at home. And so when we would be somewhere, Sherry would say, the lady that cries?
I want to go there.
I want to go see the lady that cries. That was grandmama.
Well, I love hearing stories about grandmama because, I was only like 1 year old when she passed away. So I love hearing stories, and I'm so grateful for the memories I have of Papaw, and glad that I got to spent a lot of time with him before he passed away in 2012. Which, speaking of Papaw, I love what Sudi did in his life, because just to help those that may not be familiar with our family that are watching. So my Papaw, we always call him Papaw Tolbert. His name was Cecil. He lost his wife, grandmama, who we're talking about. Was it 92?
Yes.
Okay, so he lost his wife in 92, and he was a widower from 92 until 2000. What would it have been?
4 or something like that, because they was married about 7.5 years.
Okay, so more than 10 years he's a widower. And my visits to see Papaw when I went with my dad, they were always great, but he just seemed kind of down, But then Sudi came along, and Sudi is Aunt Sandy's mom, and sparks started to fly there.
Sparks for sure.
Yeah, And how did that start? They went to Ohio together. Is that where it all started?
Well, they were both lonely, and they'd grown up 17 miles apart, just like we were. And
they knew each other, in earlier years, just didn't visit.
So we thought it'd be good if they get together. Now, both our brothers was not in favor of this. They thought we were pushing them and all that, but it proved otherwise.
They started. He went to one of our family reunions with us, and from there, I guess we sort of did matchmake. Come to think of it, but from there they started going out for dinner, or a hamburger, and it was just so nice for them to be able to talk with their peer. And so from there, then they came to Ohio.
Our parents always came for Thanksgiving, Mom and Dad. And so he asked her that year, would you like to go with me to see the kids? So they came. Well, Dad got me over in the corner. He always had a Christmas club that he divided among us to buy gifts for our children. So he got over and he said, I've got money for all you guys, but I don't have anything for her. I said, well, what do you want to give her? He said, a ring. So he proposed to her.
Well, he tried to.
Yeah, she backed out.
She backed off. But then a few days later, she called me to tell me that he had asked her to marry him. And I said, so what do you think about that? She said, well, Sissy, I just don't know. I marry every guy that asks me. And I said, well, Mom, I do too.
Because Dad was her third husband. She'd already buried two. And I told Dad, I said, she has the kiss of death, Dad.
But took a chance.
So we married him in their home. And I had the funerals of both Mom and Dad. I had the privilege of doing that 20 some odd years apart.
And in fact, Cecil had planned to come to Papua New Guinea to visit us toward the end of our last term. And was all packed, had his passport, and wasn't Uncle Jay coming with him?
No, Clyde from Bethel Church.
Okay, one of the guys from the church, and Granny passed away, and he had to cancel the trip.
1st of October, and they were coming the end of October, so he didn't get to come. I wanted to see the field, because no matter how many pictures you show, even movies, you don't see it until you see it.
And it's a part of the South Pacific, of course, so it was a big World War II site. And
Dad
he
served
was
over
in
there in the Philippines.
World War II. So, it was in that neck of the woods, and we thought it'd be really great if he could see it. But he never got to go.
Well, and then just before he died, we'd moved to this location, this town called Washington Courthouse, Ohio. That was in 2012, and he was planning to come over here and never made it. Because that last time we went home, he was sitting on the couch near death, but we didn't know it. But he died just a couple of days after that.
Well, I love when we're going to see Mom and Dad and we pass Sudi's house, because Sudi's 95
next month, 95.
Next month, wow. So she's been now without Papa. He died in 2012. Wow, 8 years. Wow.
8 years.
Yeah.
She was married about 8 years to him. Now it's been 8 years. And our sister-in-law can do a real beautiful mailboxes she would paint. Well, she's got 3 lined up now. And she says, I'm not painting any more mailboxes.
She decorated them with free-handed flowers, paint. And she said she wasn't doing any more.
So the bottom line is, after 37 years as my wife, she's now my sister.
But we're trying to decide, since his dad has passed away, and does that still make me his sister, or do I go back to being his wife? We're not sure.
But I'm 75, and Abraham left for another country when he was 75. Remember when we went down in Egypt, he told Sarah, tell him you're my sister.
Right. That's right.
So we've had a lot of fun with that. Telling the story. A lot of people don't believe it because I tell stories like Triple T, and they just say, oh, that's another one of Bill's stories. But and I'm glad you're carrying on the tradition. You're a lot like Uncle Jay. He could take a story and make up half of it. And he knew. I mean, he had a vacuum sweeper dealer come to his house and went through it all, and they bought it. The next day, we went down there. He went through the whole spiel like he was the salesman, with adding a lot of humor, of course. Oh, yeah. But we grew up with great families, and we still have a great family on both sides, but it's getting smaller and smaller. In fact, Sudi's the last one of our generation. We got a couple aunts that are still alive that had married uncles, but that's life.
Right. Well, every time we go to see mom and dad and we pass Sudi's house, and sometimes we've been able to drop by, it's been great. But I always tell Megan, I'm just so thankful for her because, she made Papa's last years. Just
absolutely.
It was a wonderful arrangement because she is a nurturer and he really loved being nurtured too.
And if you remember, Mom, that didn't happen too much. It was more like water and oil. But they loved each other, It is an interesting thing that's happened. But we're so thankful for our families and our churches. We were married in the little church that Sandy grew up, because they've built a new building now. But so, there's been a lot of disappointments, but we learned that disappointments can become his appointments.
Well, you need to be careful comparing your story to Abraham's story, because if you track with his, I guess Aunt Sandy is going to have a baby here. When she's 90.
Well,
that could be a greater miracle than Mary's.
Well, and my older brother Philip, as you well know, passed away 2 years ago. But he, like I said, he sort of was not favorable with this, but that wasn't long. And he went up to Sudi and said, "Sudi, this is the best thing that's happened to Dad." Because Philip being the elder and us being away in ministry all the time, it filled the spot and made the link even stronger. And so everybody come through when it was all said and done.
We're truly blessed. I'm so thankful for all my family. We don't see each other enough, but I'm thankful for technology that helps us to be able to stay in touch. And we're just truly blessed.
Well, I was thinking, we didn't have all this when we were overseas. We didn't have cell phones. We didn't have fax machines and none of this stuff. And so for us to write home airmail and to get a letter returned, it took a month. And we sent a lot of cassette tapes that way. So we were separated. And first year I had appendicitis over there. And it was a medical emergency. And to make a long story short, I was in the hospital when I finally got there for a month and nearly died. And Mom wouldn't even mention me in the letters during that time, fearful that I had died.
Wow.
And we came home with the idea we were going to get back on the field as soon as possible. But God has other plans.
Absolutely.
Somebody says, I think the Bible's pretty close on that, man plans and God laughs.
Yeah. Yes. That's for sure. So after coming home from Papua New Guinea, home at that time was Indiana.
Yes.
Okay. So how did God lead you to Ohio?
Well, our denomination is mostly an Ohio church. It's a small denomination, but it's like the Wesleyans and the Nazarenes. We all started about the same time, but in Ohio, there was none of that going on from the other denominations. And so we were split over doctrine of what we believe the Bible taught. And so that was the beginning. And in fact, right now, we got more churches overseas than we have home. We only have about 200 churches right now here in the States. And we got 120 in Papua New Guinea.
When we first got involved in Ohio, we took a small church in the next town, a couple of towns over from where we live now, in Williamsport. And that's where we were when the call to missions came. Our headquarters is in Circleville, 3 towns over. And when we came back from the field, we just settled. We settled here. We settled in that little town, and we both worked in the missionary headquarters, our headquarters for our whole missions organization. And then from there, he went later on to a church as an administrative pastor, and I went to our Bible college to work. And I worked there almost 20 years. So our roots are, our children were born in Circleville, Ohio. So we have roots in this area, and our church is here. So that's how we got started here and how we decided to settle here.
Mm-hmm. Now, the college that you worked at, that's Circleville Bible College?
Right. Now it's Ohio Christian University.
Okay. So is the college still Christian Union, or is it?
Yeah.
Yes. It's just a part of the product. A lot of people think the college is over us, but it's not. And it's grown a lot in the last years. We have, of course, once online teaching began, we've got about 12 satellites now from there. In fact, we have a school, a visible physical school now in Atlanta, Georgia.
Oh, okay.
A satellite campus that
a lot of them are doing that now.
It's brick and mortar, but we have a lot online.
Right. And for those that aren't familiar with the denomination, am I correct in saying that John Maxwell is from the denomination?
Yeah,
right.
In fact, his father, when we came in, was the president of the college. And of course, that's how we got into the denomination, was through John Maxwell. Because when he graduated, he and his wife had got married, and he took his first church. There was a church that had pulled out of a denomination and went with Church of Christ Christian Union, and Mom and Dad started attending it. And so from that, Sandy and I are the first missionaries that John Maxwell sent out to the field.
That's pretty neat. That's pretty neat.
Yeah. So they were a big part of our life. In fact, our first child was stillborn, and Sandy could not get out of the hospital for the funeral, but we had a gravesite, and John and Margaret were there, and John preached the funeral of our first child.
Have you been able to stay in touch with them at all?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah, you can do it online. In fact, he has such a memory. When
he never forgets you. I didn't see him for 25 years, and he still remembered my name.
In fact, when he left our denomination, went to a bigger denomination out in California, and he could learn just like that. He had such a memory. Photographic, I guess. I have it too. I just don't have any film. But he had the ushers to stand at the door back when Polaroid cameras were there and take picture of everybody new coming in and write their names on it and give it to him. By next Sunday, he would be at the door greeting them by name.
That's awesome.
He's very unusual. He has the charisma. He has it all, and John has done well.
And Sandy, I don't know, because I know you're a governor. You're still working, right?
I'm still working. Yes.
Yeah. I don't know how much you can share. You may have to kill me if you tell me. But can you enlighten us on what you do?
I work as an independent contractor with the Department of Labor and Department of Energy. And in a nutshell, the uranium plants around the country have had accidents and spills and that kind of thing through the years. And what our team and our contract consists of is gathering the data, going to those sites either in person or through emails or whatever, and gathering the information that another contract needs to compensate those people that worked in those situations before the days of protective gear and safety measures and all of those kinds of things. So we are the data collectors. I am with a team that consists of scientists. At one point, we had 3 atomic submarine captains as some of our team members, but they're all brainiacs, and then me.
We wonder how that happened, but God is good.
And I am their administrative support.
And she does a great job. They said if you quit, we quit.
I travel sometimes with them, not recently, of course. But it's a very interesting job, and I still kind of think of it as a ministry in a way, because we're helping families that accumulated massive amount of medical debt through no fault of their loved one who worked for these situations before they had the knowledge that they do now to protect them. So it's still kind of ministry.
Mm-hmm.
And I enjoy it very much.
So how long have you been doing that, Aunt Sandy, working in that job?
It was When Mark came.
About 13 years.
Awesome.
So I've had three career. Well, I've had 4 careers. So.
But one husband.
And one husband.
So you worked at the college. You're doing this. You worked
I was a missionary, active missionary, and then worked at the missionary department headquarters for several years. So I'm getting old.
That's what Chad tells us anyway.
So for those that, because I think really this time has been really hard on a lot of people, and I mean that's an understatement, right? And with us being home more than usual, I think marriages have really been strained from this. So being married 52 years, what's some advice that you have for maybe some couples that maybe watch this?
Don't do it. Don't do it.
Talk.
Communication. And like everything else, it's communication. And, you know, the Bible says don't go to sleep when you're angry. And we had the privilege of hearing, what's her name? The one that's paralyzed.
Johnny Erickson.
Yeah, she was here when Reagan came to Columbus, Ohio. And she told that, says it's hard to be angry with your husband when he has to brush your teeth and everything else. And she says, as far as that Bible, the sun hasn't gone down to real late in our marriage.
Got quite the story, doesn't she?
Oh, yeah. Look at the ministry that's come out of that calamity.
Incredible.
It's wonderful. Yeah, we never know.
That's right.
We never know.
The last thing I wanted to talk about is kind of a random thing, but I always love this about you, Uncle Bill, that you're, because it's unique. You got into ventriloquism. So when did you get into that, and do you still do that? You still have Hank, and tell a little bit about that.
Well, I was always shy. Believe it or not, I was not external to people at all, and I always enjoyed it. Back then, it was Paul Winchell that had a show, and he always ran out with a figure, and I realized later it's because he had polio. So he ran out with it, and I got him. So I asked for one at Christmas when I was 11 years old in the 6th grade, and I got it. That's the little one. I don't know if you've seen the little one or not. As I started with that, well, our teacher in that little old country school was a very unique teacher, Miller Scarlett, and every Friday was a fun day. We started off with a talent show. Get up in front of the class and do your thing. And so that was my first outgoing appearance. After that, I was at the PTA. God used that in my life to get over being afraid of talking in people. So I used it. I got a lot of support for him to go overseas in that beginning time. But it didn't work so well over there. First of all, you have to go through a translator, and humor loses it somewhere in the translation. In fact, I started teaching school after 6 days was there, and I was trying to, break the ice with my students, and I told an elephant joke back then. If you remember, way back there, we had all these elephant jokes. So I told about the elephant painting his toenails red and hiding in a cherry tree, and went through all that, and a little boy raised his hand. He said, "Tolbert, Mr. Tolbert, what's an elephant?" But a better story than that, I teach them the songs we grew up with. So I taught them, with the duck, duck here and the duck, duck there, E-I-E-I-O, and they would break out laughing. Well, I wonder, what did I say so funny? Well, I found out in their language, the E-I-E-I-O is close enough to say, watch where you're stepping. Somebody just used the bathroom right in front of you. And it sort of fits, with a duck, duck here and a duck, duck there, E-I-E-I-O.
That's good.
Go back to Hank.
Oh, Hank, yeah.
Didn't work.
I tried to use it. I mean, I used to do chalk talks too, and I tried that overseas. It would work with the younger people more so. That when we had a group at our station once, I went out there and tried to do a show, and our people are animistic. They believe there's spirits in everything. I mean, that's why it was hard to baptize. And it rained 200 inches of rain a year over there, so our rivers were at flood stage most all the time. Good enough, the missionaries did the early baptisms before we had people that were ordained to do it. and they stood underneath my arm, so they were short. They weren't pygmies, but they was medium-sized people. And I took off his head to show him that, it wasn't real. Well, he about fell over in the ground. What kind of spirit is this?
So Hank had to be put away.
Yeah. And I've tried. I mean, everybody asks me, everybody identifies with that in my early days. And I've tried. And you have to do it all the time. I mean, it's when you're really going strong, he actually talks without you knowing it. And you think, now how am I going to get out of this? But I did find out it's a good teaching tool, because they'll let it go if he says it, but they won't if I say it. So it's been a tool of God used. I always wanted to get a professional figure, never did, but God did use that to put me where we are. I mean, God always opens the door of the right ones, the right connections, and you never know what will spark.
Mm. I love that.
I won a lot of contests back in the day, I remember I was in the marching band at Orleans, and we had a Labor Day parade over in Bedford and had a talent show. And I won first prize over there.
Wow. That's great.
So God did use it. And he's up in the attic. He's still chip off the old block.
Now, didn't you have some joke about, people say, hey, did you bring your dummy? And you said something about.
Oh, when we were dating, I did a lot of youth services. And this one group asked, over and said, did you bring her dummy? And I said, yeah, she's sitting right over there. So at the beginning, Sandy knew what was for.
I learned really early on that if I didn't have a sense of humor, I better find one real quick. This is not going to go.
And I think God's had a sense of humor. If not, I'm in a heap of trouble.
In fact, our second date, we went on a picnic. And when we got home, I leaned over to see how much of the cream pie was left. And he was standing beneath me, and he went. And I went, still good.
So God prepared her too. I always tell her she's more than I deserve. And couldn't be what I am today without her. Mm-hmm. We say now it takes two of us to make one, but we decided this week it's going to take a little more than that. Forgetfulness, like I said, I've already forgot what I told you. And what is your name?
And that's something I mentioned that at Uncle Philip's funeral. That's one of my favorite memories of when our family did have get-togethers. Just you and Uncle Philip and Dad. You'd get to laughing, and Uncle Philip. You'd think he was, he was the serious one of the three of you. But he'd get to laughing harder than anybody.
I don't know if I told you, but thank you for the Papua New Guinea flag behind you.
Oh, you're welcome. I thought that would be.
We flew that when we went. It was still under Australia, so the Jack flag was above and the Papua New Guinea other, and I had to teach my students the pledge to the flag. And I said, I can't say it with you. I'll tell you what it is, but my allegiance goes to another flag. And I told them about the American flag. But it is a beautiful place, beautiful people, and I thank God for the call, even though it's halfway around the world. It's 12,000 miles either way you go, and it's a long trip. Took us 5 or 6 plane changes before we got there. It's too late to back out then.
Well, this has been awesome. I love doing this because, I think it's going to be a blessing to others, especially our family, but it's always a blessing to me because I learned things I knew everything we talked about, but not some of the details I didn't know about. So it's great. I think with technology, it is a blessing, but it's also like if it wasn't for technology, we couldn't do this. But also sometimes we can get so tied to our screens that we don't talk about things like this. Like, hey, tell me about,
and that when Dad and the uncles used to get together on the front porch, they would talk about all their friends, the genealogy and all that. And I missed that. Before Granny did pass away, I took some notes during that time because who was who. And in fact, I have a Bible of Grandpa Thomas that Uncle Kenny gave me. I didn't know he was a lay minister back in the day.
Oh, wow.
So.
I didn't know that either. How about that?
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Uncle Bill and Aunt Sandy for joining me today. I'd love to pray with you before we leave. Lord, I thank you so much for Uncle Bill and Aunt Sandy. And Lord, I'm so blessed to be a Tolbert. I'm so thankful for our family, knowing that it's important to know you and to live for you. And I'm thankful that I learned that at an early age, as Uncle Bill and Aunt Sandy learned too in their families. And Lord, just thank you for their marriage. Thank you for the 52 years that they have gotten to be a team and to glorify you. And just thank you for their commitment to doing everything for you, even now, as they are in their later years, believe it or not. I know to them it seems like time has flown and it can't be real. But I thank you that in this season of life, when a lot of people may think, well, we just want to relax and just, they're still thinking about ways to do ministry and ways to share your gospel. And I just thank you for that. I thank you for their example to live as a couple with you at the center as they continue to love you and love others. Lord, I pray that you would bless them. I pray that you would continue to use them. Thank you for Sharon and Chad and their families. I pray that you'd bless them as well. I pray that you would help us to be able to get back to normal soon, whatever that is, and you would help us not to get discouraged, though, that we would remember that you're still on your throne, even though this season of life has been unlike any other that we've been through, at least in our lifetimes. And Lord, I pray for Sudie as well as she prepares to celebrate another birthday, her 95th birthday. I thank you for her. And as I mentioned, I'm just so thankful for how you used her to bless Papaw. And Lord, I pray for her with her health. And Lord, we're just so grateful for all of our blessings. And we pray all this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.